Black history is usually told through the lens of America's civil rights struggle, but that barely scratches the surface. The impact of Black communities isn't limited to one country or one movement. It's part of the foundation of societies around the world. It's in the music you stream, the words you use, the food you eat, and the fashion trends you follow. It's in the technology you rely on, the sports you watch, and the entertainment that defines pop culture. For centuries, Black people have shaped economies, governments, and cultures in ways that often go unrecognized. The transatlantic slave trade displaced millions, but it didn't erase who they were. Their languages, religions, music, and knowledge adapted to new environments, creating traditions that still shape daily life. Even before that, Black communities built trade networks, pioneered scientific advancements, and influenced global politics in ways that continue to leave an imprint. The truth is, Black history is a story of impact, a legacy that continues to shape the world. So join us today as we explore that legacy. Give this video a like to show your support, and let's begin. What surprisingly many people don't actually know is that world history begins in Africa. Scientific evidence points to the continent as the birthplace of humanity, where the earliest known human ancestors lived millions of years ago. Fossil discoveries in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tanzania, including the famous Lucy skeleton, confirm that early humans first walked the earth in Africa before migrating to other parts of the world. Archaeological finds such as the Omo remains in Ethiopia and the Turkana Boy in Kenya further support the fact that Africa was home to the earliest Homo sapiens. Genetic research also traces all human ancestry back to a single population in Africa, making the continent the starting point of the human story. These discoveries are so remarkable that they still influence modern medicine, genetics, and even artificial intelligence studies that model human evolution today. The migration patterns of early Africans provide valuable information about how diseases spread, how genetic diversity developed, and how human adaptability allowed people to survive in different climates. As human populations grew and adapted, they formed communities that developed into thriving civilizations. Africa became home to well-established political systems, economic structures, and cultural achievements that shaped the world in ways that continue to be felt today. Societies mastered agriculture, metallurgy, and city building long before many other regions, laying the foundation for innovations that would spread beyond the continent. The Nile Valley saw some of the earliest large-scale farming communities, leading to the rise of powerful kingdoms along the river. In the Sahel region, where vast trade routes connected different parts of the continent, cities flourished as centers of commerce and governance. Contrary to popular belief, these civilizations did not exist in isolation. They engaged in trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchanges with their neighbors and far-off lands, forming connections that shaped economies and cultures beyond Africa's borders. Among these influential powers was the Kingdom of Kush, located south of Egypt. Kush produced builders, warriors, and rulers who expanded their influence into Egypt itself. The Kushites ruled as pharaohs during Egypt's 25th dynasty, known as the Nubian dynasty, which restored traditional Egyptian religious practices and monumental architecture. Their capital, Meroe, became a major center of iron production, trade, and culture, with a writing system that remains only partially deciphered today. For many, many years, this kingdom traded and interacted with civilizations in the Mediterranean and the Middle East, proving that Africa was always part of the bigger picture when it came to global trade and leadership. The economic and political influence of African civilizations extended across the continent, with West Africa being home to some of the wealthiest and most sophisticated kingdoms in history. The Mali Empire, led by rulers like Mansa Musa, controlled vast trade networks that linked Africa to Europe and Asia. Mansa Musa's legendary wealth, gained from the empire's abundant gold mines, made him one of the richest individuals in history. His pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 left a lasting impact, as the gold he distributed along the way temporarily devalued the currency in cities like Cairo. But his influence was not just economic. He also invested in education and culture, funding the expansion of Timbuktu, which became one of the world's leading centers of learning. The manuscripts produced at Timbuktu's University of Sankore covered subjects such as astronomy, medicine, and mathematics, contributing to knowledge that influences the world today. Further east, the Aksumite Empire in Ethiopia became a dominant force in trade, linking Africa to the Roman and Persian worlds. Its rulers built towering obelisks that still stand today, a great proof of the empire's advanced engineering skills. Aksum was also one of the first major states to adopt Christianity, a transformation that influenced religious traditions across the globe. Meanwhile, the Kingdom of Ghana, which predated the Mali Empire, controlled the trade of gold and salt, two of the most valuable commodities of the time. Merchants from North Africa and the Mediterranean traveled across the Sahara to do business in its bustling markets. Further south, the great Zimbabwe civilization built an urban center with massive stone walls and towers that remain some of the most impressive ancient structures in Africa. This city, which thrived between the 11th and 15th centuries, was a stronghold of power and wealth, engaging in trade with the Swahili coast and beyond. Goods from as far as China and Persia have been found among its ruins. These societies developed their own systems of governance, education, and trade that rivaled any civilization of their time. African scholars studied astronomy, medicine, and law, producing manuscripts that documented knowledge still referenced by modern historians. Timbuktu's University of Sankore became a place where people from all over Africa, and even beyond, came to exchange knowledge and push ideas forward. African art, music, and oral traditions kept history alive long before written records came along. And those traditions continue to shape how stories are told in books, movies, and media today. The truth is, Africa was never isolated from the rest of the world. It was a place where trade, culture, and ideas flowed across continents, influencing economies and societies far beyond its borders. For centuries, Africans moved across continents through established trade routes, connecting them to the Middle East, India, and China. Long before European intervention, Swahili merchants along Africa's east coast exchanged gold, ivory, and spices with Arab and Persian traders, creating economic and cultural ties that spanned thousands of miles. These connections influenced language, architecture, and religious practices, many of which can still be seen today in East African coastal cities like Zanzibar and Lamu. The trade networks also allowed for the exchange of knowledge, with African merchants bringing goods and ideas from the interior of the continent to international markets. As trade flourished along Africa's eastern coast, cultural and intellectual exchanges were also influencing the northern regions. The Moors, an African and Arab Muslim group, ruled parts of Spain and Portugal for nearly 800 years, leaving behind innovations that shaped European society. They introduced advanced irrigation systems, developed new medical practices, and established centers of learning that preserved and expanded knowledge in mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. Cities like Cordoba and Granada became hubs of education, where scholars translated and preserved works of Greek and Roman thinkers. The influence of the Moors can still be seen in Spanish and Portuguese architecture, cuisine, and even language. But as European colonial expansion grew, Africa's relationship with the world changed. The transatlantic slave trade forcibly removed millions of Africans from their homelands, tearing apart societies and transforming global economies. From the 16th to the 19th century, European powers and African collaborators participated in the capture and sale of men, women, and children, sending them across the Atlantic to work on plantations in the Americas. The demand for labor to fuel the production of sugar, cotton, and tobacco led to an industrial-scale human trafficking system, with European ships making repeated voyages between Africa, the Americas, and Europe in what became known as the Triangular Trade. As this trade expanded, the journey across the Atlantic, known as the Middle Passage, became one of the most brutal aspects of the transatlantic slave trade. Enslaved Africans were packed into ships with little room to move, forced to endure horrific conditions that included disease, malnutrition, and abuse. Many did not survive, their bodies thrown into the ocean. Those who did were sold into forced labor in Brazil, the Caribbean, and North America, where they were treated as property rather than people. In Brazil, which received the largest number of enslaved Africans, sugar plantations depended almost entirely on their labor. In the Caribbean, vast sugar estates subjected enslaved people to grueling conditions, while in the United States, cotton plantations expanded slavery into the economic system, making human bondage a key part of the country's financial growth. Even under these extreme conditions, African cultures endured. Enslaved people carried their languages, religions, and traditions with them, blending them with new influences to create Creole cultures in the Americas. Music, food, spiritual practices, and resistance strategies adapted, keeping African heritage alive even in oppression. The rhythms of West African drumming became the foundation for musical genres such as blues, jazz, reggae, and samba, influencing sounds that are now heard across the world. Spiritual traditions evolved into religions like Vodou in Haiti, Santeria in Cuba, and Candomblé in Brazil, merging African beliefs with Catholic influences to create rich spiritual systems that continue to thrive today. Foods such as okra, black-eyed peas, and yams became staples in the American South, the Caribbean, and Latin America, ensuring that African culinary traditions survived across generations. Despite unimaginable hardships, Black communities found ways to adapt, survive, and build new communities. Their traditions, beliefs, and creativity spread across the world, influencing the culture and identity of every place they touched. What many people might not know is that the fight against slavery and oppression was not a passive struggle. From the very beginning, enslaved people resisted in countless ways, from subtle acts of defiance to full-scale revolts. The most famous example is the Haitian Revolution, a successful slave uprising that led to the creation of a free Black republic. In 1791, enslaved Africans in Saint-Domingue, led by Toussaint Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and Henri Christophe, defeated French forces and declared Haiti's independence in 1804. The revolution spread across the Americas, showing the world that enslaved people could rise up, take back their freedom, and build a nation of their own. Today, Haiti remains a symbol of resilience and self-determination, with its revolution continuing to influence global conversations about liberation and justice. Meanwhile, in Jamaica, the Maroons, formerly enslaved people who managed to escape, established independent communities and fought against British rule. Their successful resistance forced the British to sign treaties recognizing their autonomy, making the Maroons one of the first groups of formerly enslaved people in the Western Hemisphere to secure their own land. Their legacy lives on in Jamaica's culture, language, and traditions, and their fighting spirit continues to inspire global discussions on self-governance and anti-colonial movements. In Brazil, the Quilombo dos Palmares became a sanctuary for thousands of escaped enslaved people, standing strong against repeated Portuguese attacks for nearly a century. Under the leadership of Zumbi dos Palmares, the Quilombo grew into a thriving society, proving that enslaved people could create self-sustaining communities despite constant threats. The legacy of Quilombos continues today in Brazil, where thousands of Afro-Brazilian communities still fight for land rights and recognition, connecting their struggle to a long history of resistance. And in Mexico, Gaspar Yanga led an armed rebellion against Spanish colonizers and successfully negotiated the establishment of a free settlement for Black people. His victory led to the founding of Yanga, Veracruz, which still exists today as one of Mexico's first free Black towns. His legacy remains a powerful example of early resistance against European oppression, influencing movements for racial equality and indigenous rights across Latin America. Even in places where large-scale revolutions didn't occur, the fight for freedom continued. In the United States, the Underground Railroad was created by a network of abolitionists, both Black and white, who worked together to help enslaved people escape to free states and Canada. William Still, a free Black man known as the father of the Underground Railroad, documented the stories of those he helped, preserving their histories. Levi and Catherine Coffin, white abolitionists, operated what became known as the Grand Central Station of the Underground Railroad in Indiana. Harriet Tubman, an escaped enslaved woman herself, became one of the most famous conductors, personally leading dozens to freedom and inspiring countless others to resist. Meanwhile, in Britain, Olaudah Equiano, a formerly enslaved African, wrote an autobiography that exposed the horrors of slavery. His first-hand account became one of the most powerful arguments for abolition, shifting public opinion and influencing the British Parliament's decision to end the transatlantic slave trade in 1807. His work, along with the activism of groups like the Society for Effecting the Abolition of the Slave Trade, proved how personal narratives and grassroots efforts could bring about real political change, an approach that continues to be used in human rights movements today. By the 19th century, slavery was being dismantled in many nations, but its effects didn't disappear. The fight for black liberation didn't end with the abolition of slavery. It evolved into new struggles against segregation, disenfranchisement, and racial violence. In the United States, the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s pushed for fundamental changes in laws and policies that denied Black Americans equal rights. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and Rosa Parks became powerful figures of resistance, and their messages reached beyond American borders, influencing activists around the world. In South Africa, the anti-apartheid struggle gained global support. Nelson Mandela looked to the U.S. civil rights movement for inspiration, using nonviolent protests, boycotts, and international pressure to push back against a system of racial segregation that had controlled the country for decades. He openly acknowledged how leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. reinforced the power of peaceful resistance, proving that the fight for equality was never limited to one country, but was part of something much bigger. Meanwhile, in the United Kingdom, Black communities fought against systemic discrimination, police brutality, and unequal opportunities. The arrival of Black Caribbean immigrants in the mid-20th century, part of the Windrush generation, led to widespread racism and exclusion. Inspired by the civil rights movement in the U.S., British activists organized protests, formed advocacy groups, and fought for policy changes. Their efforts contributed to the passage of anti-discrimination laws, including the Race Relations Acts of 1965, 1968, and 1976, which made racial discrimination in employment, housing, and public services illegal. In Brazil, where slavery lasted longer than in most other countries, the fight for Afro-Brazilian rights intensified in the late 20th century. Activists challenged the deep racial inequalities that remained after slavery was abolished in 1888, confronting issues such as police violence, economic exclusion, and lack of representation. Inspired by the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement in the U.S., Afro-Brazilian organizations like the Unified Black Movement emerged, demanding equal rights and recognition of African heritage and Brazilian identity. Today, Brazil continues to grapple with racial justice, but the activism that grew from this period has led to affirmative action policies, cultural recognition, and a renewed fight against racism. The reality is, Black history isn't just something to look back on, it's in everything we experience today. Whether you realize it or not, the music you stream, the fashion you wear, and the technology you use have all been shaped by Black culture. The rhythms and styles created by Black musicians gave birth to jazz, blues, reggae, hip-hop, and Afrobeats, influencing global pop culture and redefining entire industries. The hip-hop tracks on your playlist? They started as a movement in the Bronx and have since become a worldwide phenomenon. Afrobeats? It's now filling stadiums across continents and changing the sound of modern music. Sports wouldn't be the same either without Black athletes breaking records and pushing boundaries. Jesse Owens shattered expectations at the 1936 Olympics, proving that skill and determination can rise above discrimination. And Serena Williams didn't just win championships. She changed the way people see tennis and inspired a new generation. The speed, power, and talent you see in basketball, track and field, And even Formula One today? That's the impact of Black excellence in sports. Now think about the books that have challenged the way you see the world. Writers like James Baldwin and Toni Morrison told stories that forced people to confront issues of race, identity, and justice. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie wrote about gender and power in ways that have influenced conversations in literature, politics, and beyond. If you've ever read something that made you rethink society, a Black writer may have been the voice behind that message. And it's not just about music, sports, and books. Black innovation has changed the way you live. The traffic light, invented by Garrett Morgan. Home security systems, Marie Van Britten Brown. Advancements in open-heart surgery, Dr. Daniel Hale Williams. These contributions don't just sit in history books. They're part of the technology and medical advancements that impact your life today. The way you dress, talk, and even scroll through social media has probably been influenced by Black culture without you even realizing it. Streetwear, which started in hip-hop, has taken over fashion, with brands and designers drawing inspiration from styles that came straight from the streets. Natural hairstyles, once unfairly judged, are now celebrated in entertainment, fashion, and workplaces. The slang you hear, the viral dance trends. So much of what makes pop culture exciting comes from Black creativity. Black history is intertwined with the world around you. It influences the way you think, speak, create, and connect every single day. And the impact of Black history continues to unfold. It's in the conversations about racism and justice that are changing laws and mindsets. It's in movements like Black Lives Matter, which have sparked protests, policies, and discussions in places far from where they started. It's in the music, art, and businesses that push culture forward. Across Africa, economies are evolving, industries are growing, and people are reclaiming ownership of resources that once benefited outside powers. Black history, world history, isn't just about what was endured. It's about what was built, created, and set in motion. Its impact is everywhere, from the culture people celebrate to the movements that challenge the world to be better. This story isn't over, and its influence will continue to drive progress, inspire generations, and transform lives in ways that are felt every single day. So, what part of Black history stood out to you the most? Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. If you'd like to explore more stories like this, check out our other videos. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our insightful discussions. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.